The champagne flute felt like a weapon in my hand as I watched my wife of 3 years prepare to destroy our marriage in front of 150 guests. I'm Alex Brennan, and if you're expecting a sob story, you've come to the wrong guy. What you're about to hear is how I turned the worst day of my life into the best revenge story you'll ever witness. The Riverside Country Club sparkled with autumn elegance that Saturday evening. Natalie had insisted on renewing our vows for our 3rd anniversary, claiming she wanted to celebrate our love properly this time. What she really wanted was an audience for her grand finale. "Ladies and gentlemen," Natalie announced, her voice carrying across the reception hall like honey over broken glass. She looked radiant in her cream silk dress, blonde hair cascading over bare shoulders. "I have something very special to share with you all tonight. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." I sipped my bourbon and watched from our head table, my journalist instincts already sensing the story unfolding. Natalie's hands trembled slightly as she held her champagne flute. Nervous energy I'd noted 3 weeks ago when I first suspected what was coming. "This toast is for the man I've secretly loved for 10 years, she continued, her voice gaining strength. "The man who's always been there for me, who understands me in ways I never thought possible." The crowd murmured appreciatively. My father, Dr. Richard Brennan, sat rigid in his chair, his weathered geneticist hands folded precisely. He knew what was coming too. We'd planned this moment together. Natalie stepped away from the microphone, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She walked past me without a glance, past our wedding photos displayed on easels, past the ice sculpture of intertwined hearts that cost me $2,000. She stopped in front of my brother Jake. Jake Brennan, 35 years old, 6'2" of personal trainer perfection, golden boy extraordinaire. His fiancée Tessa sat beside him, Instagram ready in pink designer everything, her mouth forming a perfect O of confusion. "Jake," Natalie whispered into the microphone she'd carried with her. "Will you dance with me?" The silence stretched like a held breath. Then Jake stood, his face flushing red, and took her hand. The DJ, clearly not briefed on this particular plot twist, fumbled for a romantic song. Unchained Melody began playing, because apparently my wife's affair needed a soundtrack. I stood up slowly, adjusting my navy suit jacket. Time for my performance. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice cutting through the righteous brothers. "Before we get to the dancing, I have an announcement of my own." Natalie's face went white. Jake froze mid-step. "Perfect." "Dad," I continued, pulling out my phone and activating the voice recorder, "didn't you say you had some test results to share? Something about that DNA analysis we discussed?" My father stood with the deliberate precision of a man who'd spent 40 years delivering life-changing news to patients. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a sealed envelope. "Yes, Alex. The results came back yesterday." His voice carried the authority of decades in genetic research. "The paternity test on Jake confirms what we suspected. He is not biologically related to the Brennan family." The room erupted in whispers. Tessa's champagne flute hit the floor with a crystalline crash. Jake's face went from red to ash gray. "And the other test?" I prompted, enjoying every second of this theater. "The pregnancy test on Natalie confirms she's approximately 10 weeks along. The paternity test indicates Jake is the biological father." Chaos. Pure, beautiful chaos. Chelsea Morrison, Natalie's maid of honor and co-conspirator, swayed in her chair before toppling sideways in a dead faint. Uncle Frank started choking on his dinner roll. Tessa began screaming something about betrayal and fake families, but I wasn't finished. "Since we're sharing family secrets," I announced, pulling out my tablet, Let me read some text messages I found on Natalie's phone 3 weeks ago. Alex, don't, Natalie pleaded, but her voice was lost in the crowd's roar. I began reading. Jake, baby, once we get access to Alex's trust fund, we can disappear together. He's so stupid he'll never see it coming. The pregnancy will seal the deal. He'll think it's his until after the paperwork is signed. More gasps. Someone's grandmother clutched her pearls so hard I thought she might strangle herself. Here's another good one, I continued. From Jake to Natalie. 3 more months of pretending to be his brother and we're home free. The adoption records are sealed. He'll never find out I'm not really a Brennan. Mom's secret dies with her. Jake lunged toward me, but 2 of my college friends caught his arms. You set us up. No, Jake. You set yourselves up? I just bought the popcorn and enjoyed the show. I'd called the police 20 minutes earlier. They arrived right on schedule, their red and blue lights painting the country club windows in carnival colors. Detective Morrison, no relation to the unconscious maid of honor, had been very interested in the insurance fraud documents I'd discovered. Forged beneficiary forms, fake marriage certificates for insurance purposes, falsified medical records. Nothing federal, nothing that would disappear into bureaucratic hell, just good old-fashioned local fraud that would stick. As they led Natalie away in handcuffs, she turned back to scream at me. You orchestrated this whole thing, you manipulative bastard. I raised my bourbon in a toast. Guilty as charged, but unlike you, I didn't break any laws doing it. The last thing I saw before the police car doors closed was Jake's face pressed against the window, his mouth moving in what I assumed were very creative curse words. The wedding guests sat in stunned silence, their dinner plates growing cold, their champagne flat. I walked to the microphone Natalie had abandoned. Well, folks, I think that concludes tonight's entertainment. The bar's still open for another hour, courtesy of the Brennan family. Try the salmon. It's less fishy than my marriage was. Monday morning brought the media circus I'd been expecting. Wedding DNA disaster rocks local family, screamed the headline of the Tribune's online edition. The video had gone viral. Apparently someone's teenage nephew had live-streamed the whole thing on social media. I sat in my home office, a converted bedroom in my downtown apartment, scrolling through the comments while drinking coffee that tasted like victory. My phone buzzed constantly with interview requests, friend requests, and messages from people I hadn't heard from in years. The apartment felt different without Natalie's presence. Cleaner, somehow. I'd had the locks changed Sunday morning, along with the security codes and passwords for everything. 3 years of marriage had taught me she was thorough when it came to gathering information she could use later. My landline rang. Yes, I still have one. Occupational hazard of being a freelance journalist whose sources don't always trust with their cell numbers. Alex, it's Dad. Have you seen the news coverage? Hard to miss it. Channel 7 wants an exclusive interview. So does the Tribune. Are you going to do it? I leaned back in my desk chair, looking out at the Chicago skyline. October sunshine painted the buildings gold, making everything look optimistic. Depends. Are Jake and Natalie still in custody? Released on bail yesterday evening. Jake's staying at some motel on Route 47. Natalie went to her mother's house in Winnetka. Pamela Foster's mansion in Winnetka. I'd always hated that house with its pristine white columns and perfectly manicured lawn that screamed, "We have money, and we want everyone to know it." Pamela had never approved of her daughter marrying a middle-class journalist, even one with a modest trust fund. I wondered how she felt about her daughter's pregnancy by a fake Brennan. What about Tessa? She's filed for dissolution of their engagement. Apparently, she's also consulting with lawyers about potential fraud claims. Jake used the Brennan name on several business ventures. Beautiful. The dominoes were falling exactly as I'd hoped. My cell phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at Starbucks on Michigan Avenue at 2 p.m. in Chelsea. Chelsea Morrison, Natalie's best friend since college, The woman who'd helped plan this whole scheme. The woman who'd fainted so dramatically at the wedding that she'd needed paramedics. I was curious what she had to say now that her co-conspirator was facing fraud charges. I arrived at Starbucks 15 minutes early, claiming a corner table where I could watch the entrance. Chelsea appeared exactly on time, looking like she hadn't slept since Saturday. Her usually perfect makeup was minimal, her designer clothes wrinkled. She ordered a venti something or other with extra shots and slumped into the chair across from me. "You destroyed her," she said without preamble. "She destroyed herself. I just provided the venue." Chelsea stared into her coffee like it might contain answers. "How long have you known?" "About Jake not being my biological brother. 2 years. About the affair. 6 months. About the pregnancy and the trust fund scheme. 3 weeks. Why didn't you just divorce her quietly?" I leaned forward, studying her face. "Because quiet doesn't teach lessons, Chelsea. And because you were helping her." Her face went pale. "I don't know what you mean." "Sure you do. You helped her track my financial information. You provided alibis for her meetings with Jake. You even helped her research the legal requirements for accessing my trust fund." I pulled out my phone and showed her a screenshot. "Your text to her on September 15th. Found the loophole in the trust documents. If something happens to Alex, or if he's declared mentally incompetent, control passes to his spouse automatically." Chelsea's hand shook as she reached for her coffee. "She said you were abusive. She said she needed to protect herself." "And you believed her?" "I wanted to believe her. Natalie's been my best friend since we were 19. When she told me you were threatening her, that you'd become controlling and possessive." She trailed off, staring at her hands. "Did you ever see any evidence of this alleged abuse?" "No, but..." "Did you ever ask to see medical records, photographs, witness statements?" "She said you were too smart to leave evidence." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "Chelsea, in the 6 months you were helping her plan this, did you ever consider that maybe, just maybe, she was lying to you?" Tears started flowing down her cheeks. I thought I was helping her escape from a bad situation. I thought we were saving her. Instead, you helped her commit fraud and destroy 2 families. Jake's fiancée is devastated. My father spent Sunday fielding calls from relatives who want to know what other family secrets we're hiding. And you're sitting here crying into overpriced coffee because you got caught. She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "What do you want from me?" "Information. I know there's more to this story. Natalie didn't come up with this plan on her own, and Jake's not smart enough to forge legal documents. Who else was involved?" Chelsea hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "There's something you should know about your trust fund. Natalie wasn't the only one researching it." She showed me a series of text messages between herself, Natalie, and a third number I didn't recognize. "Who's that?" "Marcus Webb. He's a paralegal at Hutchinson, Drake & Associates. They handle estate planning for wealthy families. Natalie hired him to research the trust fund terms and find loopholes. Marcus Webb." I made a mental note to have a conversation with Mr. Webb very soon. "What else, Chelsea?" "The pregnancy. It wasn't an accident. Natalie stopped taking birth control 4 months ago. She was trying to get pregnant by Jake specifically because she thought it would make her claim on your money stronger." The coffee in my mouth suddenly tasted bitter. "She planned the pregnancy?" "She said a baby would make you less likely to fight the trust fund transfer. She thought you'd be so excited about becoming a father that you wouldn't ask too many questions about the legal paperwork." I sat back in my chair, processing this information. The betrayal was even deeper than I'd realized. Natalie hadn't just cheated on me, she'd planned to use a baby as a weapon in her theft. "Why are you telling me this now?" Chelsea wiped her eyes with a napkin. "Because I've been thinking about what you said at the wedding, about how she set herself up. I've been going over everything that happened, and I realized something." "What?" "Natalie never loved Jake. She was using him just like she was using you. She told me once that Jake was perfect for the job, because he was desperate to be part of a real family and he'd do anything to keep the Brennan name. And now? Now Jake's facing fraud charges, his fiancée left him, and he's about to be a father with a woman who was using him as a sperm donor and a patsy. Chelsea stood up, gathering her purse. I don't expect you to forgive me, Alex, but I wanted you to know that I'm going to testify against both of them if this goes to trial. She walked away, leaving her half-finished coffee on the table. I sat there for another 20 minutes, planning my next moves. Marcus Webb, the paralegal, was about to have a very interesting week. But first, I had a phone call to make. Tribune Newsroom, this is Jennifer. Hi, Jennifer, this is Alex Brennan. I understand you wanted an exclusive interview. The Tribune interview ran Wednesday morning under the headline, Betrayed Husband Speaks, I Just Wanted the Truth. I'd been careful to come across as the wounded but dignified victim, sharing just enough detail to keep public sympathy on my side while revealing information that would make life very uncomfortable for Jake and Natalie. By Wednesday afternoon, my phone was ringing with calls from talk show producers, podcast hosts, and true crime bloggers. I turned them all down. The story was already spreading organically, and overexposure would make me look opportunistic rather than sympathetic. Instead, I focused on research. Marcus Webb worked downtown at Hutchinson, Drake & Associates, a mid-tier law firm that specialized in estate planning and family law. According to their website, he'd been with the firm for 3 years and had a degree from Chicago-Kent College of Law. What the website didn't mention was that he'd been reprimanded twice for accessing client files without authorization. I knew this because I'd spent Tuesday evening buying drinks for a paralegal named Sandra, who worked at a competing firm. Sandra had gone to school with Webb and was happy to share gossip about his questionable ethics and his gambling problem. Wednesday evening, I positioned myself at Murphy's Tavern, a dive bar 3 blocks from Webb's office building. Sandra had mentioned that Webb stopped there most nights after work to play video poker and complain about his student loans. He arrived at 6:15, exactly as Sandra had predicted. Medium height, thinning brown hair, cheap suit that had seen better days. He looked like a man carrying the weight of several bad decisions. I waited until he'd lost $50 on video poker before approaching. Marcus Webb? He looked up from the machine, suspicious. Who wants to know? Alex Brennan. I think we have some mutual acquaintances. His face went white. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. Natalie Foster Brennan, Jake Brennan, my trust fund that you helped them research. Webb glanced around the bar nervously. Look, man, I was just doing legal research. Nothing illegal about that. Helping someone forge documents to access money that doesn't belong to them? Pretty sure that's conspiracy to commit fraud. I never forged anything. But you provided the information that made the forgery possible. You researched the trust fund terms, identified the loopholes, and explained how someone could potentially access the money illegally. Webb stood up from the poker machine, his hands shaking slightly. I need another drink. We moved to a corner booth where our conversation would be less visible. I activated the voice recorder on my phone and set it on the table between us. Tell me about your arrangement with Natalie. There was no arrangement. She hired me to do research, that's all. How much did she pay you? $5,000. For legal research that should have cost maybe $500? What was the extra $4,500 for? Webb stared into his whiskey like it might provide an escape route. She wanted me to keep the research confidential, not tell my bosses about it. Because you were researching ways to illegally access someone else's money. She told me it was her husband's trust fund. She said she was trying to understand her rights in case of divorce. And you believed her? I wanted to believe her. $5,000 pays off a lot of credit card debt. I leaned back in the booth, studying him. What exactly did you research for her? The terms of your trust fund, the conditions for early access, the legal requirements for transferring control to a spouse. And what did you find? Webb finished his whiskey in one gulp. The fund was set up to be pretty much bulletproof. No early access except in case of your death, permanent disability, or a court declaration of mental incompetence. So how did Natalie plan to access it? She was going to have you declared mentally incompetent. She'd been researching the legal requirements, documenting erratic behavior, getting medical opinions, building a case that you were unable to manage your financial affairs. The pieces clicked into place. Natalie's recent suggestions that I see a therapist for stress. Her comments to friends about my mood swings. Her insistence that I get a complete physical, including neurological testing. She was building a medical record. That was the plan. Once she had documentation of mental health issues, she could petition the court for guardianship. As your wife and the mother of your child, she'd have a strong case. Except the child isn't mine. She didn't know you knew that. I turned off the voice recorder and put my phone away. Marcus, you're going to do something for me. I'm not doing anything else for you or your crazy wife. Ex-wife. And yes, you are. Because the alternative is me turning this recording over to the police and your employer. Webb's face went even paler. What do you want? I want you to call Natalie and Jake. Tell them you found another loophole in the trust fund terms. Something that requires them to meet with you in person to sign documents. Why would I do that? Because I'm not finished with them yet. I left Webb at Murphy's Tavern with instructions to make the calls within the hour. Then I drove to Jake's motel on Route 47. The Sunset Motor Lodge was exactly the kind of place where dreams went to die. Peeling paint, flickering neon sign, parking lot full of cars that had seen better decades. Jake's room was on the ground floor, number 12, with a view of the dumpster. I knocked on the door at 8 p.m. Who is it? Your brother. The door opened to reveal Jake in sweatpants and a stained t-shirt. He looked like he'd aged 5 years in 4 days. His usually perfect hair was unwashed, his face unshaven, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. What do you want, Alex? To talk. We've got nothing to talk about. Sure we do. We need to talk about Mom. Jake's face crumpled. Don't. She made you promise to keep the adoption secret, didn't she? Made you swear you'd never tell anyone you weren't really a Brennan. She was protecting me. From what? Jake stepped aside to let me into the room. It smelled like stale pizza and desperation. Empty beer bottles covered the nightstand, and clothes were scattered across the floor. From people like you, he said. People who would use it against me. Jake, I've known about the adoption for 2 years. If I wanted to use it against you, I would have done it long before now. He stared at me. You knew? Dad told me when Mom was dying. She wanted us both to know the truth. Then why didn't you say anything? Because it didn't matter. You were my brother regardless of biology. You were part of our family. Jake sat down heavily on the unmade bed. Then why did you humiliate me like that? Why did you destroy my life in front of all those people? Because you chose to destroy mine first. The adoption wasn't the betrayal, Jake. Sleeping with my wife was the betrayal. Planning to steal my money was the betrayal. Using our family name to commit fraud was the betrayal. Tears started flowing down his face. I never meant for it to go this far. How far did you mean for it to go? I don't know. I was angry. You had everything. The trust fund, the successful career, the beautiful wife. I had nothing. You had Tessa. You had your business. You had our family's love and support. It wasn't enough. I looked around the motel room, taking in the evidence of his self-destruction. And this is better? Natalie said we could start over somewhere else. New identities, new lives. She made it sound romantic. Jake, Natalie was never planning to run away with you. She was planning to take the money and disappear on her own. That's not true. I pulled out my phone and showed him the text messages Chelsea had shared with me. Messages where Natalie discussed eliminating loose ends once the money was secured. Jake read the messages twice, his face growing paler with each word. She was going to leave you holding the bag for the fraud charges while she disappeared with my money and your baby. Our baby. Your baby. She made sure of that. Did you know she stopped taking birth control specifically to get pregnant by you? Jake's face crumpled completely. No. She needed the pregnancy to strengthen her legal claim on the trust fund. You were just the sperm donor. I stood up to leave. The police are going to arrest you again soon, Jake. Marcus Webb is cooperating with them now. When they do, remember that Natalie was never your partner in this. You were just another one of her victims. I left him crying in that motel room, surrounded by empty bottles and broken dreams. I almost felt sorry for him. Thursday evening, I sat in my car across the street from the downtown law offices of Hutchinson, Drake and Associates, waiting for Natalie and Jake to arrive for their fictional meeting with Marcus Webb. I'd spent the day setting up surveillance equipment and coordinating with Detective Morrison, who was very interested in catching them in the act of attempting to access forged documents. At 8:30 p.m., Natalie's silver BMW pulled into the parking garage. She was alone, which surprised me. I'd expected her to bring Jake as backup. I followed at a distance, watching as she took the elevator to the 15th floor. The building was mostly empty at this hour, with only a few lights visible in the windows. Perfect for what I had planned. I waited 5 minutes before taking the stairs to the 15th floor. The law firm's offices were dark except for a single light in the reception area. I could hear Natalie's voice echoing through the empty hallway. Marcus, where are you? I'm here for our meeting. I activated the recording app on my phone and pushed open the door to the reception area. Natalie stood near the receptionist's desk, looking elegant even in her obvious frustration. She'd dressed for success, black suit, designer heels, hair pulled back in a professional bun. He's not coming, I said. She spun around, her face going white when she saw me. Alex, what are you doing here? Waiting for you to incriminate yourself further. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. You're here to pick up forged documents that would give you access to my trust fund. Documents that Marcus Webb was supposed to prepare for you. Natalie's composure cracked slightly. That's ridiculous. Is it? Then what are you doing here at 9 p.m. in an empty law office? I had a consultation with Marcus about divorce proceedings. Divorce proceedings that require meeting in secret after hours? That's interesting, considering we're already separated and you're facing fraud charges. She started backing toward the door, but I moved to block her path. Where's Jake? I asked. I don't know what you mean. Your partner in crime? Your baby daddy? Your fellow defendant in the upcoming fraud trial? Jake and I aren't partners in anything. I pulled out my phone and played one of the recorded conversations Chelsea had shared with me. Natalie's voice filled the empty office. Once we get the money, we'll disappear together. Jake's so desperate to be part of a family, he'll do whatever I tell him. Natalie's face flushed red. You recorded my private conversations? Chelsea recorded them. She's been cooperating with the police since Monday. That witch who helped you plan to steal my money and destroy my life? Yeah, she's not on your team anymore. Natalie straightened her shoulders, trying to regain her composure. Fine, you caught me. What do you want? I want you to confess everything on record. Why would I do that? Because if you don't, I'm going to make your life so miserable that fraud charges will seem like a vacation. She laughed, a harsh sound in the empty office. You can't do anything to me that you haven't already done. Can't I? I pulled out my tablet and showed her the screen. Recognize this website? Her face went white again. Where did you get that? Your laptop, the one you left at our apartment, the one with all your passwords saved in the browser. The website was an escort service where Natalie had been advertising her services for the past 6 months. High-end clients, expensive rates, very discreet. She'd been funding her lifestyle and her legal research through prostitution. You're insane if you think anyone will believe that. They'll believe the bank records showing deposits that match your advertised rates. They'll believe the hotel receipts. They'll believe the text messages with clients that are still on your phone. Natalie sank into a chair, her perfect composure finally cracking completely. You bastard. I'm not the one who cheated, lied, stole, and sold my body for money. I'm just the one who documented it. What do you want? I want a full confession. I want you to admit to the affair, the fraud, the prostitution, and the plan to have me declared mentally incompetent. And if I don't, then I release everything to the media. Your mother's country club friends will be very interested to learn how Pamela Foster's daughter has been earning money. Natalie stared at me with pure hatred. You're enjoying this. More than I probably should. She was quiet for a long moment, weighing her options. Finally, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I'll confess to the affair and the fraud, but I want immunity from prosecution on the other charges. You're not in a position to negotiate. Yes, I am, because you need my confession to make sure Jake goes to prison, and I know you want Jake to pay for this as much as you want me to pay. She was right, and she knew it. Jake's betrayal had hurt almost as much as hers. Fine. I'll talk to Detective Morrison about a plea deal. Natalie nodded slowly. There's something else you should know. What? Jake didn't know about the prostitution or the plan to have you declared incompetent. He really thought we were just going to run away together after the divorce. Why are you telling me this? Because Jake was genuinely in love with me. He thought he was rescuing me from an unhappy marriage. He's guilty of fraud and adultery, but he's not the mastermind you think he is. I studied her face, looking for signs of deception. And you? I never loved either of you. I married you for your money, and I seduced Jake because I needed someone to help me get it. The confession hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd suspected as much. Why? Because I grew up poor, Alex. Really poor. Food stamps and eviction notices and wearing the same clothes to school every day poor. I swore I'd never be poor again, and I'd do whatever it took to make sure of that. So you decided to steal my inheritance. I decided to take what I needed to survive. By destroying 2 families and bringing a child into the world as part of a criminal conspiracy. Natalie's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. The baby wasn't supposed to be part of it. That just happened. Bullshit. Chelsea told me you stopped taking birth control specifically to get pregnant. Her face flushed again. Fine. The pregnancy was planned, but I'm keeping the baby. Even though it was conceived as part of a fraud scheme? Because it's my chance to start over. I looked at this woman I'd been married to for 3 years, this woman I'd thought I loved, and realized I'd never really known her at all. Start your confession, I said, activating the voice recorder on my phone. Friday morning brought news that made my coffee taste like victory. The Tribune's follow-up story ran with the headline, "Fraud Suspects Confess, Wife's Betrayal Deeper Than Initially Reported." Natalie's recorded confession had provided enough evidence for the prosecutor to file additional charges and revoke her bail. But I wasn't satisfied yet. I drove to the Sunset Motor Lodge at 10 a.m., expecting to find Jake packing his belongings and preparing for his inevitable arrest. Instead, I found his room empty, except for a note on the nightstand. Alex, I know you'll come looking for me. I've gone somewhere I can think. Don't try to find me. I'm sorry for everything. Jake. I called Detective Morrison immediately. He's running, Morrison said when I read him the note. We'll issue a warrant and put out a BOLO alert. Where would he go? Family? Friends? Somewhere he feels safe? I thought about it. Jake's adoptive mother was dead. His biological family was unknown. His friends had all abandoned him after the wedding scandal. There was only one place he might go, the Brennan family cabin in Wisconsin. My parents had bought the property when I was 12 and Jake was 9. It was Jake's favorite place in the world, 50 acres of woods surrounding a small lake, with a rustic cabin that had no cell phone service and no internet. If Jake was looking for a place to hide and think, that's where he'd go. I called my father. "Dad, do you still have the keys to the cabin?" "Of course. Why?" "I think Jake might be there." "Alex, if Jake's at the cabin, maybe you should let him be. He's been through enough." "He's facing fraud charges, Dad. Running away isn't going to solve anything." "And confronting him is?" I thought about that. "Maybe. We need to talk. Just the two of us. No lawyers, no police, no media. Just two brothers working this out." My father was quiet for a long moment. "The keys are in my desk drawer, top right, but Alex?" "Yeah?" "Remember that Jake's still family, regardless of what he's done." I drove to Wisconsin that afternoon, taking the winding back roads that led to our family property. The autumn leaves were at peak color, painting the landscape in shades of gold and crimson that reminded me of happier times. The cabin looked exactly as it had when we were kids: rough-hewn logs, stone chimney, wrap-around porch overlooking the lake. Jake's rental car was parked beside the building, confirming my suspicions. I found him sitting on the dock, staring out at the water. He looked up when he heard my footsteps on the wooden planks. "I figured you'd find me here." "It wasn't hard. This place was always your sanctuary." Jake nodded, his eyes returning to the lake. "Remember when we used to come up here as kids? We'd spend entire summers swimming and fishing and building forts in the woods." "I remember. We were brothers then. Really brothers." I sat down beside him on the dock, our legs dangling over the edge. "We're still brothers, Jake." "No, we're not. Brothers don't do what I did to you." "Brothers also don't abandon each other when things get tough." Jake looked at me with surprise. "You're not abandoning me?" "I'm here, aren't I?" We sat in silence for several minutes, watching the sun reflect off the water. Finally, Jake spoke. "I know you probably can't forgive me. I know I've destroyed everything between us, but I need you to know that I never meant for it to go this far." "How far did you mean for it to go?" "I don't know. At first, I just wanted to hurt you the way you'd hurt me." "How did I hurt you?" Jake picked up a stone and skipped it across the water. "You never saw me as an equal. I was always the younger brother, the adopted one, the one who needed to be taken care of." "That's not true." "Isn't it? When we were kids, you were the smart one, the one who got good grades and made Mom and Dad proud. I was the athlete, the one who looked good but wasn't really important." "Jake, let me finish. When we got older, you went to college and became a successful journalist. You had the trust fund, the career, the respect. I became a personal trainer. I helped rich people lose weight and pretended their problems mattered. I'd never realized Jake felt this way. You built a successful business. You had clients who respected you. I had clients who paid me to make them feel better about themselves. There's a difference." "So you decided to sleep with my wife?" Jake flinched. "Natalie made me feel important. She told me I was the strong one, the attractive one, the one who deserved better than I was getting." "And you believed her?" "I wanted to believe her. For the first time in my life, someone was telling me I was the better brother." I understood now. Natalie had played on Jake's insecurities the same way she'd played on mine. She'd told me I was the smart one, the successful one, the one who deserved a beautiful wife. She'd told Jake he was the strong one, the attractive one, the one who deserved to be part of a real family. She manipulated both of us. Yeah, but I let her. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I did it anyway because it felt good to be chosen over you for once. Jake threw another stone into the lake, this one sinking immediately. The worst part is, I really thought she loved me. Even after everything you revealed at the wedding, part of me still believed she'd chosen me because she wanted to be with me. And now? Now I know she was just using me to get to your money. I was never anything more than a tool to her. I felt a surge of sympathy for my brother, despite everything he'd done. We were both tools to her, Jake. The difference is, I figured it out before she could finish using me. How did you know? About the affair? I hired a private investigator when I started noticing changes in her behavior. About the trust fund scheme? I found her research on the laptop she left at home. Why didn't you confront us privately? Because private confrontation wouldn't have stopped her. Natalie would have found another way to get the money. Public humiliation was the only thing that would end her scheme permanently. Jake nodded slowly. I deserve whatever happens to me. Maybe. But you also deserve a chance to make things right. How? Come back with me. Turn yourself in. Cooperate with the prosecution. Help them build a case against Natalie that ensures she can't hurt anyone else. She's already confessed. To some of it. There's more, Jake. The prostitution, the plan to have me declared mentally incompetent, the forged insurance documents. She's going to try to minimize her role and maximize yours. Jake stared out at the lake for a long time. Finally, he stood up and brushed off his jeans. Okay. I'll come back with you. I'll cooperate with the police. I'll testify against her if I have to. We walked back to the cabin together, and for a moment it felt like we were kids again, two brothers heading home after a day of adventure. Alex? Yeah? I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not just because I got caught, but because I betrayed the one person who always stood by me. I stopped walking and looked at my brother. Adopted, biological, it didn't matter. Jake, forgiveness isn't something you deserve or don't deserve. It's something you choose to give or not give. Are you going to forgive me? I don't know yet, but I'm willing to try. We drove back to Chicago in separate cars, Jake following me to the police station where Detective Morrison was waiting. As we walked up the steps together, Jake grabbed my arm. Whatever happens, I want you to know that being your brother was the best thing that ever happened to me, even if I screwed it up. You haven't screwed it up permanently, I said, but you've got a lot of work to do to fix it. Jake nodded and walked through the police station doors to face the consequences of his choices. The trial began on a cold Monday morning in November. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters, photographers, and curious onlookers who'd been following the story since the wedding video went viral. I pushed through the crowd, ignoring the shouted questions and camera flashes. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Natalie sat at the defendant's table with her lawyer, looking pale but composed in a conservative navy suit. Her pregnancy was beginning to show, and I knew her attorney would use it to generate sympathy with the jury. Jake had taken a plea deal in exchange for his testimony against Natalie. He'd pled guilty to fraud and conspiracy charges and would serve 18 months in minimum security prison. In return, he'd provided detailed testimony about Natalie's schemes and her role as the mastermind behind the trust fund plot. I was called as the prosecution's first witness. Mr. Brennan, the prosecutor began, please tell the court about the events of October 15th, your wedding anniversary. I described the wedding reception, the DNA revelations, and Natalie's arrest. The jury listened intently as I explained how I'd discovered her affair and her plans to steal my inheritance. Did you plan the public exposure of these crimes? Yes. Why didn't you simply contact police privately? Because I knew Natalie would find a way to manipulate the situation to her advantage. She's extremely skilled at presenting herself as a victim and convincing others to help her. During cross-examination, Natalie's lawyer tried to paint me as a controlling husband who'd driven his wife to desperate measures. Isn't it true, Mr. Brennan, that you monitored your wife's phone calls and emails? I monitored them after I suspected criminal activity. Isn't it true that you threatened to have her arrested if she tried to leave you? No, that's not true. Isn't it true that you orchestrated the entire wedding confrontation as revenge for your wife's affair? I orchestrated it to prevent the theft of my inheritance and to expose criminal fraud. The lawyer tried several more angles, but I'd prepared for every question. By the time I stepped down from the witness stand, I was confident the jury understood that I was the victim, not the perpetrator. Jake's testimony came on the third day of the trial. He looked thin and tired in his orange jumpsuit, but his voice was steady as he described Natalie's manipulation and the details of their conspiracy. "She told me that Alex was abusive and controlling," Jake testified. "She said she needed help escaping from the marriage and that accessing the trust fund was the only way she could afford to disappear and start over." "Did you believe her?" "I wanted to believe her. She made me feel like I was rescuing her." "When did you realize she was lying?" "When Alex showed me the text messages where she discussed eliminating loose ends once the money was secured. That's when I understood that I was just another tool in her scheme." Natalie's lawyer tried to discredit Jake's testimony by pointing out that he was testifying as part of a plea agreement, but Jake's obvious remorse and detailed knowledge of the conspiracy made him a compelling witness. The most damaging testimony came from Marcus Webb, the paralegal who'd helped Natalie research the trust fund loopholes. "She specifically asked me to find ways to access her husband's inheritance without his knowledge or consent," Webb testified. "When I explained that the trust fund was designed to prevent unauthorized access, she asked me to research the legal requirements for having someone declared mentally incompetent." "Did she explain why she wanted this information?" "She said her husband was showing signs of mental instability and that she might need to petition the court for guardianship to protect the family's financial interests." "Did you believe her?" "At the time, yes. She was very convincing. She showed me what appeared to be medical records documenting erratic behavior and mood swings." "Were these records genuine?" "No. We later determined that they were falsified." The prosecution also presented evidence of Natalie's escort service activities, including bank records, hotel receipts, and text messages with clients. Natalie's face remained impassive during this testimony, but I could see her lawyer's frustration as the evidence mounted. On the final day of testimony, Natalie took the stand in her own defense. She was masterful, I had to admit. She presented herself as a desperate woman trapped in an abusive marriage, driven to extreme measures by fear and desperation. She claimed that the escort service was research for a book she was writing. She insisted that the pregnancy was an accident and that she'd never intended to use the baby as leverage in her scheme. "I made mistakes," she testified, tears flowing down her cheeks. "I made terrible choices that hurt people I cared about. But everything I did was motivated by fear. Fear of my husband's controlling behavior, fear of being trapped in a marriage that was destroying me emotionally." It was a compelling performance, and I could see some of the jurors responding sympathetically. But then the prosecution played the recording of her confession from the law office. "I never loved either of you. I married you for your money, and I seduced Jake because I needed someone to help me get it." The jury heard her admit that the pregnancy was planned as part of the fraud scheme. They heard her describe Jake as a useful tool. They heard her laugh about how easy it had been to manipulate both of us. The recording destroyed any sympathy she might have generated with her testimony. Closing arguments took place on a Friday afternoon. The prosecution summarized the evidence methodically, painting a picture of calculated fraud and manipulation. Natalie's lawyer made one final attempt to portray her as a victim of circumstance, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, how do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of attempted theft, how do you find?" "Guilty." "On the charge of falsifying legal documents, how do you find?" "Guilty." Natalie showed no emotion as the guilty verdicts were read, but her lawyer's shoulders sagged with each count. The judge scheduled sentencing for the following month, but I already knew Natalie would receive the maximum sentence. The evidence of premeditation and the calculated nature of her crimes left little room for leniency. As the courtroom emptied, I found myself face to face with Natalie in the hallway. Her lawyer had stepped away to speak with reporters, and for a moment, we were alone. "Congratulations," she said. "You got your revenge. I got justice. Is there a difference?" I thought about that. Sometimes. I hope it was worth it. What? Destroying your marriage, sending your brother to prison, putting your unborn child's mother behind bars? I hope your precious justice was worth all that. That child isn't mine, Natalie. And you destroyed our marriage the moment you decided to sleep with Jake and steal my money. You could have handled this privately. You could have divorced me quietly and moved on with your life. Instead, you chose to humiliate me in front of everyone we know. Because private consequences wouldn't have stopped you. You would have found another victim, another scheme, another way to hurt innocent people. Natalie stared at me with something that might have been respect. You know what the funny thing is, Alex? In another life, we could have been partners. You're just as ruthless as I am when you want something. The difference is, I'm ruthless in service of the truth. You're ruthless in service of yourself. Maybe. Or maybe we're more alike than you want to admit. She walked away then, flanked by her lawyer and 2 bailiffs who would escort her back to jail to await sentencing. I stood in the courthouse hallway for several minutes, thinking about what she'd said. Was I really so different from her? I'd manipulated events just as carefully as she had. I'd planned her downfall with the same attention to detail she'd used to plan her crimes. But there was a difference, I decided. I'd used manipulation to expose the truth and prevent further crimes. She'd used it to steal and deceive. That difference mattered. I walked out of the courthouse into the cold November air, past the reporters and cameras, past the curious onlookers who'd followed our story from beginning to end. My phone buzzed with a text message from Jake. Saw the news. Thank you for giving me the chance to do the right thing. I texted back, see you when you get out. We'll figure out how to be brothers again. 3 weeks later, Natalie was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison. She would serve at least 3 years before being eligible for parole. Her baby would be born in the prison medical facility and placed with social services unless Jake's family agreed to take custody. Jake was already serving his sentence at a minimum security facility downstate. He'd enrolled in business classes and was working in the prison library. His letters suggested he was using the time to reflect on his choices and plan for his future. I'd started writing a book about the experience. My editor thought it could be a bestseller, a true crime story about betrayal, revenge, and justice in modern America. But that's not why I was writing it. I was writing it because I'd learned something important during those months of planning Natalie's downfall. The truth has power, but only if someone is willing to fight for it. Sometimes that fight requires patience, planning, and yes, even manipulation. But in the end, the truth wins. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very careful, you get to be the one who helps it win. 6 months after the trial ended, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. Chelsea Morrison stood in my doorway, looking nervous but determined. I wanted to apologize, she said, and to thank you. For what? For showing me what real friendship looks like. A real friend would have questioned Natalie's story instead of just believing it. A real friend would have tried to protect everyone involved, not just one person. You made mistakes, Chelsea, but you also did the right thing in the end. I've been thinking about what you said at Starbucks, about how I helped destroy 2 families. You were right. What are you going to do about it? I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen again. I'm going back to school to study social work. I want to help people who are actually in abusive relationships, not people who are pretending to be victims to cover up their crimes. I invited her in for coffee, and we talked for 2 hours about forgiveness, responsibility, and second chances. When she left, I felt like a chapter of my life had finally closed. The next morning, I drove to Wisconsin to visit the family cabin. I'd been going there once a month since Jake's imprisonment, partly for the solitude and partly to maintain the property. As I sat on the dock where Jake and I had our final conversation as free men, I thought about the choices that had brought us all to this point. Natalie's choice to steal and deceive. Jake's choice to betray his family. My choice to fight back. All of our choices had consequences. Some of those consequences were just, and some were simply inevitable. But for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt at peace with the outcomes. Justice had been served. The truth had been told, and maybe, eventually, my family could heal from the damage we'd all inflicted on each other. I picked up a stone and skipped it across the lake, watching the ripples spread out in perfect concentric circles until they reached the far shore. Then I went inside to start writing the final chapter of my book.